What Rosenior is doing in Ligue 1 is incredible, and his crazy tactics have transformed Strasbourg into a team contending for Champions League spots, currently sitting in 4th place. Oh, and it's probably worth mentioning, he's doing it with the youngest squad in Europe's top 5 leagues. And by quite some way too. Take a look here, for example. The player here high up the pitch you might think is a central midfielder, but no, it's instead actually the centre back, and the player over here, well, that's your central midfielder who has dropped deep. It's these crazy rotations that have made Strasbourg such an interesting team to watch so far this season. So the question is, how has the Englishman solidified himself as one of the most exciting managers tactically in Europe right now, alongside the likes of Cesc Fabregas and Fabian Hürzeler, especially when you consider the fact he got sacked by Hull for finishing 7th in only his 2nd ever managerial season. So today we're going to have a look at how Rosenior has implemented these crazy tactics to make Strasbourg look like one of the most interesting teams in Europe so far, and we're going to begin by having a look at how they build up. What kind of things do they do to get from defence to the attack? Well, Strasbourg tend to line up in a shape that looks a little bit like this. It's a 4-2-3-1, but they also sometimes line up in a 3-4-3 or a 3-4-1-2, depending on who's fit and who's available, and also who they're playing against. But to be honest, none of this really matters, because what they do when they do have the ball and when they don't have the ball means the shape changes completely anyway. Now, like all teams, Strasbourg try and play a modern style of football. There's this huge emphasis on playing out from the back, and whilst a lot of traditional fans don't like it, it does allow Strasbourg to play with the ball and at their own pace. And Rosenior even said this himself. He said, if you ask any young person what do they enjoy about football, it's having the ball. So in other words, give this young team the ball and just see what they can do. It's not quite as simple as that, but it's along them lines. So to begin, they build out in a 3-2-5 shape, which is normally formed by one of the fullbacks tucking in to a wide centre-back position, whilst the other one pushes a lot higher up the pitch. And the goalkeeper Mike Penders, who, believe it or not, is on loan from Chelsea, who would have expected that, also steps out to form almost this back four. He's left-footed, so he comes out into that left centre-back position. And that kind of splits this defensive shape, so you almost have like a 4-2 build-up. And they do this really well, actually. They currently sit 8th in Europe's top 5 leagues for most touches taken in their own defensive third. And this encourages the opposition to keep pushing up the pitch. They invite the press on, and that opens up space in behind, which they can then quickly try and attack. And it's from this position where the team then look to play some quick, intricate passes through the middle, form little triangles and bounce passes, or they'll play it out wide and get some wide combinations going to progress the ball up the pitch until they eventually reach the attacking third, where they can try and create some magic and score a goal. And we're going to have a look at this example here from their striker, Joaquin Panicelli. I'm sorry if I butchered that. I'm not Argentinian, but he is, and he's having a sensational season, by the way. His stats are incredible, but he's been their striker whilst Omega's been out, and in this clip you can see he notices a little bit of space that he can drop deep into, which drags the centre-back out with him. As he then receives the pass, he can quickly tap it into the oncoming midfielder, and that opens up a big wide piece of space in the opposition's defensive line, which his teammates can then run into, a nice few passes, and they're suddenly in behind. And we see the same thing in this example as well. You can see Panicelli up top, and he's currently offside, and he almost looks as if he's going to fake a run in behind, ready for the long ball over the top, but instead he does that and then quickly shifts and drops deep into that space again. Now, it's also worth noting here that the two central midfielders do a really good job of keeping their width, and that stretches the opposition's 5-2-3 shape slightly wider, and it opens up that passing lane through the middle of the pitch for Panicelli to then receive the ball into. He then lays it off to, and I'm going to butcher this name as well, Murabet, who can play it wide, and then they can progress the ball that way into the attacking third. It's nothing outrageously difficult, but when you look at like what Harry Kane does in Bayern Munich and what he did at Spurs, it's them sort of movements where they drop deep almost into a number 10 role, drag a centre back out with them, and it opens up space in behind for their teammates to then run into. And it's a great way of attacking space very quickly and very efficiently. And it's actually through these kind of patterns and these build-up play systems that they've got going which helps them generate such good chances. And actually they currently sit in a respectable 8th place in Europe for XG generated so far this season. It just then comes down to, can they convert these chances? And to be fair to them, yes, they can. They can convert them chances pretty well. They've slightly exceeded their XG so far this season, scoring a total of 24 goals. So let's have a look. What does Strasbourg do when they come to their attack? Now, as we mentioned, we know they like to build out in a 3-2-5, and that means they have 5 players on the attacking line, but that doesn't stop sometimes a wide centre-back or one of the midfielders making a run to create a front 6, almost like a 3-1-6 or a 2-2-6, which overloads that attacking line. And you tend to see one focal man up top, 2 players out wide that hug the touchline and stretch the pitch open, and then you've got 2 players that sit slightly inside in the half spaces who can cause a little bit of threat and create some movements. In their recent game, we actually saw this more as Omega and Panicelli started, and you had 2 focal players up top with only one person sitting deeper in the 10. But it's the same principles. They have 5 players in the attacking line to try and attack the opposition at all spaces and all angles. And one way that they really like to attack is by getting the ball out to the wings quickly and look for crosses into the box, with the likes of Panicelli up top, who is literally just the Argentinian Alan Shearer, and you've got Emmanuel Omega too. They're both really good in the air, they have great aerial threat, and so you'll be a fool not to get the ball into them because they are clinical in them positions. Try and whip the ball in, get crosses on their head, and they will try and score a goal. And that's exactly how they scored against PSG. I can't remember what goal it was, but they scored a really good goal from this method. And as you can see in this example, they begin with their 3-2-5 shape. Again, it's so obvious. Enciso drops ever so slightly, and it draws out Hernandez, which leaves Doué, which, yes, is Desiree Doué's older brother, with space to run into on the right-hand side. He's their right wing-back. He sees the space. He's going to attack it. And if you look into the box, or just making a run into the box, you've got Panicelli. He's alongside the PSG centre-back, Zabarnyi. Remember him from Bournemouth? Good player. But unfortunately, he loses his battle here. A sensational cross comes in, and Panicelli somehow leaps miles above the air and gets his head onto the end of this brilliant cross and generates quite a lot of power, directs the ball really nicely, and I mean, it's a brilliant goal. Very traditional goal, but it's a great goal. Puts it past Chevalier, who had no chance. And that's a really nicely worked goal against arguably the best team in their country in PSG. Actually, not even arguably. Not even arguably. But what might shock you is, whilst this is a method that they tend to look to do when they attack, they do like to get the ball wide, get some combinations going and whip the ball in. They actually rank for the second least amount of crosses per 90 in Ligue this season. So it isn't their go-to method of scoring. What is their go-to method though? I hear you asking. It's through balls. Who would have thought I'd say that? No, we're not playing FIFA or FC, whatever it's called. They just play loads of through balls. And actually, when you look at the statistics for that, only Bayern Munich have more through balls per 90 than Strasbourg do this season. They currently sit joint second alongside Arsenal. So we're putting them at that elite level for through balls, especially when you consider the areas that they're playing these passes. Even more so, actually, when you look at the player that has created most or played most through balls in Europe this season, it is Valentin Barco. You might remember him. He was an Argentinian left back that signed for Brighton, didn't really work, went to Sevilla, I think, didn't really work, and then signed by Strasbourg. He's a left back, now playing in the right of a central midfield double pivot, and he is playing some incredible passes that set up his teammates brilliantly, and it's a real joy to watch. But they play these passes in really dangerous areas. They look to play simple, well-timed through balls in between defenders to play the pass into their teammates who are running into the box. Nothing ridiculously over dramatic, nothing crazy. Just really nicely timed, well-weighted passes that allows their teammates to get shots away just inside the box, or can they play a pass across the face of goal? That's how they're generating a lot of their attacks and where actually a lot of their XG is coming from. Now, this is an example against Auxerre. In this moment, you can see that Strasbourg have committed 6 players to their attacking line, so they're trying to overload that attack already. But what's really interesting in this moment is if you have a look on the left-hand side, they've actually got a 2 versus 1, with Barco and Nanasi overloading Auxerre's right-back. Now, as the pass comes into Barco, you can see the right-back steps out to try and apply some pressure, but that opens up a nice little bit of space for Nanasi to run into. Just outside the box, nice little bit of space, he makes the run. And it's well timed before the centre-back can react, so he's got a little pocket of space. And Barco does really well. As the pass comes into him, he absorbs the pressure from the right-back and plays a first-time pass through ball into Nanasi, who can then find himself in a little pocket of space just outside the box. Can he pick his head up? Can he have a look across the face of goal and put in a good ball? Yes, he does. Fires it across the face of goal, and Panicelli is there to fire it home. And just these little intricate passes have suddenly opened up a wonderful goal-scoring opportunity. And this is another example from their game against Rennes. Now, they actually lost this game 4-1, but they had 20 shots. And of them 20 shots, 14 of them were inside the box. Again, through majority of them were from this kind of through ball method. I'm not calling it some over ridiculous meta that they're using. It just seems to be their main way of creating chances by finding little pockets of space. In this situation, Panicelli makes a run which drags one of the Rennes midfielders with him, and it opens up a little bit of space for Nanasi to make a run alongside Enciso. And again, we've got a 2 versus 1 situation. So can they make the most of it? Obviously they can. Barco plays a really nice pass into that area of space. Well-weighted ball as well, so it's not overhit. And this then means that one of Enciso or Nanasi can take the ball in a bit of space and try and create something with it. In this situation, Nanasi is making the run. He takes the ball in his stride and he's running at full sprint and is able to carry the ball inside the box, slightly ahead of his centre-back that's currently trying to win the ball off of him. But he's pretty much got a 1 versus 1 against Bryce Samba. Nanasi finds himself in a nice little pocket of space, and then it's just, can he finish the chance? And again, as we've mentioned, Strasbourg have been okay at finishing their chances. He pokes the ball into that far corner past Bryce Samba. And again, they've scored. Now, yes, they lost 4-1, but it's the same sort of principles. It's the same patterns of play that we are seeing consistently. But now let's have a look without the ball. How do Strasbourg defend? What systems do they use? And how do they press? All very important things in modern football. Well, Strasbourg tend to be quite aggressive in how they look to defend. We're going to have a look at that clip from the beginning of this video. You can see here they've gone man for man, and that's a very modern style of defending. It seems to be the thing nowadays. You go man for man when you haven't got the ball, try and put the opposition under a lot of pressure, and it forces them to almost play long balls over the top to try and create an attack. And in this situation, you can see the centre-back has followed his person, the person that he is man marking, all the way out into the almost attacking line. He's followed him way out. But you can then see the central midfielder, Valentin Barco, and he's noticed his man, who's managed to drop deeper to try and make a run in behind the Strasbourg defence. He's followed his man. So you've almost seen this rotation where one centre-back, I think it's Sarr, has come all the way out and Valentin Barco has dropped all the way deep. But this makes it really hard for Lille to then find their spare man. Who's the person free that they can play the pass into that isn't under direct pressure from a Strasbourg player? If you'd like me to spoil the answer, it's no one. It's no one. So in this situation, Lille are forced to try and create something magical, and actually it's that centre-back, Mamadou Sarr, who wins the ball back and creates a turnover high up the pitch. But in fact, Strasbourg currently ranks 7th in Europe for the tackles made in their attacking third. That basically means they're pressing really aggressively, so high and so committed that they're winning the ball high up the pitch. And what's even more interesting is they sit 3rd in Europe for, and I'm going to get this wrong, shot creating actions from a defensive action. No, I said it right. That's quite impressive for me. That basically means how many shots have they taken directly as a result of winning the ball back high up the pitch. So that's a stat only bettered by Leeds and Bournemouth, which is unsurprising, but that means that they're pressing so high that they're limiting how many passes their opposition can make in their own defensive area by putting them under maximum pressure, staying intense, staying tight, being really aggressive in how they go about winning that ball back, and they do it really well. And when they do, they try and make the most of the situation. Can they get a shot away? That is what they look for. And again, the answer is yes, they've done it pretty well so far. But as they do have to start dropping a bit deeper, they normally, I'm going to call it a 4-4-2 mid-block. It varies actually quite a lot, but I think this is the most common theme that I noticed, is it's a 4-4-2, and we're going to look at this screenshot here from their game against FC Harken in the Conference League. You can see the defensive line of 4, the midfield line of 4, and the 2 attackers. And what's really good about this is that they're happy for the opponents to have the extra man at the back. They're committing 2 players into the press in their 2 strikers, whilst the opposition have 3 centre-backs and a goalkeeper. So naturally, the opposition always have an extra man than what Strasbourg do. But they're okay with that because they're happy to let one of the opponent's centre-backs have time, have space with the ball, because realistically, are they going to create that much? They're definitely, unless it's Virgil van Dijk who can play an unbelievable switch and turn defence into attack really quickly, chances are they're not going to create all that much. And so they're happy for them to have the ball. Instead, they'd rather stay compact, stay narrow, stay deeper, and make sure that their midfield and defensive lines are as tight as possible so that they always have an extra man in their position. So if the ball does become a bit loose, if there's a duel that they can go for it and try and win it, whilst also maintaining their shape and maintaining a solid defence. That's really important. And they do it well. I'm not going to say exceptionally. We're not looking at an Arsenal situation here who also defend in a 4-4-2 mid-block. They do it exceptionally. We're not quite at that stage yet, but they're certainly showing signs of a promising respect for the defensive moments of the game. And that's really interesting in a young squad, because a lot of times you see young squads make mistakes because they don't want to track back. They don't want to defend. This team do, and that's really important. But that's where you then have your strong, experienced heads come in. Now, actually last season, I'm going to say that was probably Andre Santos, and he's really young, but he was their captain and he showed a lot of maturity in the defensive moments, organising his team, making sure they're in shape. And this season they've got Ben Chilwell doing the same. He's one of 3 players, I think, born before the year of 2000. He's still not that old, but he's got more experience than a lot of them, and so it's up to him to kind of guide and organise that defensive shape to make sure that they stay disciplined. But when they do have to drop really deep, they try and shift into a 5-3-2 mid-block. And if you have a look in this example here, during build-up, they lose the ball. So what do? They apply immediate pressure to the ball so that they can try and slow down Lille's chances of counter-attacking. That means that they've at least buying themselves some time to get back into position. All the players run back and they do drop into a 5-3-2. And they do it really well because they make sure they get in their position, keep their lines really tight together, and they stay compact. The front two are then able to angle the play, apply pressure at the right direction that forces Lille to have to go back to the centre-back, and then they have to start playing it around the back again, and Strasbourg can then start pushing back up and they win the ball back. Again, a nice little example of how they do defend really well. They do it properly and they're willing to do it. That's really important. I think that's the thing that we need to take away. For such a young squad, they're willing to defend and they're ambitious when they've got the ball, and I like that. That's why I think Strasbourg have been doing so well this season. But as I said earlier on, we have to remember this is a young team with a relatively young manager. Rosenior's only in, his 40s, I think. He's not that old, and so there are going to be mistakes, and this team isn't perfect, but it's all about, can they learn from their mistakes? Can they show that they're developing and progressing in their journey as a team? So far, I think the signs are positive, and the tactical blueprint that Rosenior has implemented at this level, taking a team like Strasbourg from mid-table Ligue and team to Champions League contenders, is really impressive, and he's getting some things right. He's getting a lot of things right, actually, and it puts him at that elite level, or he's certainly showing promise of reaching that elite level. So I genuinely wouldn't be surprised if a bigger club were looking at him as an option as their next manager. Look at what happened to Vincent Kompany at Burnley. I think we could see a similar thing with Rosenior. Or, I mean, if something bad happened to Maresca, God forbid. I genuinely wouldn't be surprised, but thankfully Maresca does seem to have things under control at Chelsea. Thank God. Let me know, where do you think Strasbourg are going to finish this season? And thank you very much for watching. Until next time, I will see you very soon.